This is the Comedy Kiosk, podcast by Monday and Munoz. Please welcome Monday and Munoz.
Welcome to the Comedy Kiosk, a podcast in which we discuss news, opinions, and ideas about comedy stuff, really. And today's topic is mainly workshopping. Like, is there a point to workshop? Should we workshop? What are the benefits of workshopping? Are there any negatives? Who should you workshop with? How often should you workshop? What's the point of workshopping? And what kind of workshops should we do, sign up to, things like that? So, Igor, what do you think about workshopping? Do you workshop? Have you held any workshops? Would you take a workshop?
Do you wanna stop saying the word workshop
I love
before it
workshop.
loses
Workshop
all meaning?
So,
You know how it happens when you hear or when you say a word too many times and then it just sounds like
I'm getting it out of
gibberish
my
to
system.
you, like blah 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 blah, 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 workshop. Yeah. So as I know, because we talked recently, we talked about open mics and stuff, and you are now running your shows, your open mics, and I'm running mine as well. But what I don't do is run regular workshops, and I know that you do. So you have like a bi-weekly thing where 1 week it's at the same place, same time, right?
Yes.
Every Sunday, but 1 week it's an open mic, and the other week it's a workshop.
Exactly.
Actually. So for us, we don't really have that. The problem is actually, I would say, the time, because I would prefer to do it more not on an off day or something, but to do it, let's say, 2 hours before the show starts, because then you can come with your new material, you can test it like with the comics or whatever, run it past them, get some ideas or tips, and try it out immediately. But with the venue that we're currently working with, it's really hard to do it because I have to go there like an hour or two earlier anyways to set up the venue itself. So I don't have time to actually, and there is no kind of space to actually sit down and to come to the stage area and perform and so on. It's just, I have to set up the lights, the sound, the seating, everything. So it's not, if there was a venue where, you walk in and it's already kind of show ready, then we could just walk in 2 hours earlier and do the workshop. So we don't really do it regularly, and I think that's a problem, because I think it's very important and very useful for everyone, not only like the beginners, not only the open micers, but for them maybe even more, like especially because what I'm noticing now when I gave a few opportunities to other comedians to host open mics, for example, and so on. And I see that, you can learn by doing. That's, if you do it 100 times, you'll learn how to host, if you have that in you, I guess. But on the other hand, you could just learn by transferring knowledge. So if I had the chance to, just show them and let's say teach them and workshop with them, then maybe it would be better. But as you run it actually regularly, maybe you can share a bit more how your workshops are going and what's like the attendance, what's the point of it, what do you mostly work on, how does it look?
Yeah, well, see, that's kind of why the topic kind of popped up, because it started okay. I had it was weird. It was like no one came, then 2 people started coming, and then it dropped down to 1. So I've only got really one regular person, which is Victoria, and she comes every single workshop. And we work on materials, we discuss stuff, she tells me what she's working on, I give her some ideas, sort of like, what about this, maybe you can work on this angle. I don't try to give actual punchlines, but rather sort of, kind of go, maybe you can play with this concept, or maybe with that, so, so she can kind of work on it herself, sort of thing, because that's, I think also the thing about workshopping is, it depends on what your level you're at. I mean, if it's us, then we probably maybe even give each other a punchline, like, why don't you try this? But I think it's helpful for a younger comedian to be able to kind of try to come up with their own stuff, to make it their own, voice-wise. But the other day, literally the other time, we finished, and she was like, why is it just us? Because it's only her and me now. And she's like, why don't the others workshop? And I'm like, well, I know they're busy guys, because the other 3 main guys are all new dads as well, similar to myself. But they come for the shows, but they don't come for the workshop sort of stuff. And I know, they're pretty good and stuff, but I don't know. I was sort of like, I mean, it's not necessary to do workshops, but it is helpful. like you said, you can just work on so. And some people, they work well on their own. They work on their own material and stuff like that, and you just practice at home and things. But I think in the beginning, it's also good to hear other people's perspectives, because I think the good thing about workshops is you get comedians with different ways of thinking. And when someone comes up with maybe a punchline or another angle, it might not be something that you originally thought of or where you would instinctively go. But it might bring up something that just inspires you or makes you go, okay, no, I'll try that. I'll go in that direction. And even if you don't end up using it, it does show you that there are different ways of thinking of the same material. At the same time, there are times where, for example, I'm sure you've had it, where someone after a show has come up to you and go, oh, I like that bit. But, you know, I thought you were going to go this way because that's blah, blah, that's where I would go and da-da-da. And you're thinking to yourself, yeah, thank you. But at the same time, you're like, yeah, but everyone would go that way. It's cliched.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I don't want to do that one because of the fact that you came up with it. Not because you came up with it, but because you and every other person who sees that would see it. So, for example, I was doing, you know, my cats and dogs bit. And I have thought of it before, where the idea is in the last final bit, it's about having sex and a pet walking in, right? And the cat walks in and blah, blah. And he was telling me that, you know, oh, I thought you were going to go in the direction of, it turns out, like, you know, you tell your girlfriend at the time to be quiet. Because the twist is you're the one having sex with the cat, right? And I thought, yeah, I know. That's a very obvious twist, though. That's the obvious twist there, and that's why I don't do it, because I don't want to go in that direction. You know, I'd rather keep it in a way cleaner, because that material, I can, even though it's talking about sex, I have done it. Not because I planned to, but you know, there were kids in the audience, and they were fine with it, and the parents were laughing and stuff, because it's actually not that vulgar, but it is kind of, you know, there's hint and stuff. Yeah. But it was the other one, I don't know. I just think it's too cliched for me personally. And it's just, I just don't want to go there. Maybe when I first started out, that would have been definitely the direction I would have gone in. But now I'm like, nah, because it's where everyone's expecting you to go. And so I don't, you know, that's what I mean. But maybe there's ways I can add extra elements, but yeah. So, but I think it's interesting at the workshops, you hear that because you can decide, I like that, or no, I don't.
But when you say workshops, like the workshops you do with this one person and you know, that you organize, those are mostly writing workshops, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, right now, the way I set it up, originally my plan was there was meant to be 3 elements. It's now 2. I took away the middle element because it just took up too much time. And I thought, no, once you do it, it's not necessary. But the idea is now we watch actually a professional clip. We watch someone who's performed short clips, but we watch parts of comedians, and I try to come up with different things. Like, so last time we looked at Noel Fielding at the Australian, the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and we saw like his bit there, and we're talking about how being an alternative comic, how he plays with these different, like his wording, the way he introduces himself there really sets up beautifully the style of comedian that he is, from the way he looks to the way he talks to the way he goofs around a little bit, how he interacts with the audience. It's just he's basically doing it to set up, this is the kind of person I am, this is my sense of humor. It's weird, but it's cheeky, but it's not offensive. It's cute in a way, but it is a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, shit. What's that alternative comedy thing? I forgot the damn word. Whimsical, that's it, whimsy. It's whimsical humor, sort of like, it's a little bit whimsical, it's a little alternative, but it's not vulgar, but there is cheeky little things mentioned in there, but blah, blah, and I play with it, you know. But it's all done in a lighthearted, fun way, you know. So, and it's beautifully set up, and I use that as an example so that then, and we can deconstruct it, we discuss it. After that, then it's like, all right, what materials have you got working for? Ba-da-da-da. And of course, someone like Vicky, who has been to all the workshops, sometimes when I hear it, do you remember that time that we discussed or we watched this comedian? This bit here would be something cool that you could play with, so forth. And I know, like, another guy, Andrew, he's come to the show, and I noticed, like, because when he has come twice to the workshops, and one of the times I showed Gary Gulman, the comedian, and we did the bit about the states, about, you know, the AZ, the documentary style. It's a great bit, and the way he words certain things and the way he hypothesizes and uses certain language, I noticed Andrew use it about a month later. He had a bit that was similar in style to the Gary Gulman. And when he got it, I was like, the Gary Gulman bit. And he's like, yeah, that's why I was kind of like basing it around that sort of thing. And as a beginner comedian, that's brilliant because he took a style or an element or a wording, but it wasn't, you know, he didn't steal it. It wasn't plagiarism. He didn't take the bit, but he used the style thing and he was developing his style. And I could see him going more in that direction a little bit, but with the dry, like Stephen Wright bit as well. And I'm like, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. And I think the two that he's come to has actually benefited, but he hasn't come to any more. And it's kind of a shame. And this is what Victoria was talking about. It's like, yeah, she's like, why don't they come? Because, these are helpful. Like, it may not seem it at the time, but, you hear different bits and you hear different styles and you go, oh, I'm going to use that.
So it's kind of two parts. One part is just, let's say, consuming other comics, like material styles and so on, dissecting it, seeing kind of why it works, what are different styles, what you can pick up here and there from those people, learn from them and so on. And then the second is just like based on writing, maybe rewriting, getting some new ideas for new like points of view for your jokes. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, with kind of co-writing or like with editing or punching up material and so on, I'm always up for that. Like I'm always up to help someone, but I rarely take any help. I mean, people have 1,000 times people have approached me and said what you just gave an example of, like after the show, like, oh yeah, this supermarket bit, that's really funny, but if you said onion instead of potato, that would be so much better, right? Or something like that, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, thanks. And I immediately I know I would never. The thing is, why for me it doesn't work, and it's not because I'm like so egocentric or something that I believe, no, I know best, and it's always the way I did it is always better than any other suggestions. It's more like I love this joke because it is like it is. If I change it, I just won't love it anymore. And why would I do it if I don't love it? So the only way I would accept, not the only way, but like the easiest way for me to accept like some feedback and an input would be if what you can offer genuinely makes me laugh. Not if it's just a different way. So I said potato, but you offer me onion. It's just a different vegetable. Yeah, the word is maybe funnier or something, but I don't care. But if you offered me a punchline that actually like I didn't think of, that surprises me, then I'll probably consider that. Like if you can make me laugh with my own joke. Otherwise, it's already how I want, like I believe it's funny. That's why I'm doing it. So you have to make it funnier, not just funny to you. Because I don't care what's I want it to be funny to me. Right? And so that's...
and I like it also like when a comedian or someone else kind of offers you how to clean up your bit. Like, because maybe your bit's a little bit too wordy here. And it's like, look, if you do this or that, you can cut out the fluff. Like, for example, I had the story about the colonoscopy. And at the end, there was, in the beginning, when I first did it, I was trying to add this extra little bit at the end. And I performed it. And Ivan Yavitz, he was watching the show. And he was loving it. And at the end, he's like, great bit. But your punchline is like 2 minutes beforehand. Like, that's where you should end it. And he was right. And I was like, yeah. And then he gave me this little bit where I could do like a little visual blow on the candle sort of thing, using the mic stand as a candle. And it worked great. Like, I thought, oh, that is lovely. Because I think he could see my style and he's like, this would suit you. This is how you can end it. And he goes, and that extra bit there, and he goes, you can maybe work it as a whole extra side bit for a longer show, but it should be separate. And it's something that maybe you would use, not straight after, but you would kind of harken back to continue later. And he goes, but that one needs to end on this punchline with the birthday thing. And I was like, yeah, you're right, it does. Because that's your big laugh. I was missing the big laugh and trying to go for more. And he was like, less, do less, it's better. And he was right. And that's what I mean. Like, that was handy criticism. It wasn't about, oh, I can give you an extra punchline, but rather I can clean up what you have and I can tell you where you're fucking around too much. And it's like, I'll clean it up here at the end. And I was like, yeah, thanks. That does help it.
That's why I think there are some like rules of thumb that you need to learn when kind of writing and when performing. Because now we're talking about writing, but I think we can also talk about workshops for kind of performance and stage presence and so on. But when we talk about writing, the great rule of thumb is like cut out all the fat, right? Cut out all the unnecessary stuff, and this is something that I think both of us historically have a problem with. Our setups are kind of long and elaborate and and it takes time to get there, which then comics that went through like Ivan, because Ivan has been heavily edited by like TV producers and so on, because he for a long time was a TV comedian, and then you do your same 20 for like 100 times around different like 100 different venues, and every time after that a professional kind of producer editor approaches you and says remove this and this.
Yeah.
So after like 100 work in progress sets, he has trimmed great tight 10. But that's like professionally edited. And this is then how these comics, especially like the TV comics and whatever, learn that comedy should be like that. And when you watch, like when you read a book about comedy, when you watch any like podcast or workshop or anything, all the comedians would say, you know, say it in less words. What you can say in 20 words, you can say in 3 or in 5. But I think, as any rule, it comes with exceptions. I've only heard this from comedians. I've never heard an audience member or a friend or someone come to me and say, you know what, like this setup, it was just too long. No, the opposite. What I've heard 100 times from the audience was, I like how you draw us in. You paint the picture. You like set the mood. You know, you create this whole story and then in the end you flip it. So it's like the long kind of tension, you build it up, you kind of they don't have to assume, they go with you on this journey. And then you make the journey funny, like the story funny. And that's why every time a comedian tells me, again, only comedians tell me this, like, you should like trim your setups. I'm like, well, you know, why? Because it gets the big laugh in the end anyways, and people appreciate being taken on that ride. So, you know, does it have to be only about the goal, or it can be about the journey as well? Like, let's listen to the whole story. Let's hear every detail, because then it's easier for them to imagine that scenario. Or because sometimes I would throw in really unnecessary stuff. You know, I can tell a story about, hey, I was on a plane the other day and I was wearing these really comfy sweatpants, and then the airplane took off and blah, blah, and they're like, why are you don't need that. I'm like, well, maybe I do. Maybe they relate to it more because they also fly in sweatpants. You know? So does it always have to be boom, boom, punchline, boom, boom, punchline? Does it? Well, I don't think so.
And I completely agree with you, actually, because, well, you know my style. I'm definitely a waffler. But the thing is, I think there's good waffle and there's bad waffle. And that's the only thing we really need to do, is we need to get rid of those moments where it's not adding tension. The tension part, that's absolutely true. Drawing people in, absolutely. Like, because this is it, like, what was it, Hannah Gadsby, when I was watching, I think not the first one, Douglas, was it the second one, the one after that?
Nanette,
yeah. She was talking about tension. She mentioned at the very beginning, like, I'm going to build tension and I know how to release it because I'm a professional, that's what I do. And I remember hearing that and going, oh, interesting. Because she started talking about this whole tension thing. Maybe it wasn't Douglas. Anyway, but the point is, she started talking about how a comedian can build tension and knows when to break it. I'm like, oh, that's good. And the bigger you can hold that tension, the bigger the laugh at the end. I think that's this thing, like you were saying. I have heard comedians talk about this tension thing. And one technique is to continue doing the story and building up. Like, the way I started realizing that maybe I might be good at comedy was, I was telling this St. Peter's joke, right? And it was a joke that, it's already a long joke in itself, as jokes go. But it's one of those jokes that gets passed around the playground and stuff like that, right? So it was a joke that I liked, a St. Peter's joke. And it's, you know, it's very simple. Guy goes up to heaven. St. Peter tells him only tragic deaths are allowed in. And so he goes, no. St. Peter gets a call from God saying, let only the tragic deaths in. So he starts interviewing each person, and he tells the first guy, okay, how is your death tragic? Guy basically says, I think, you know, I knew my wife was having an affair with me. And anyway, it goes to this whole story about the three guys. And then at the end, you realize all three stories are linked, right? And the punchline is at the end is the last guy says one line that lets you realize that all three stories have been linked together. And it's like a sort of joke. So I was telling this joke, and that joke would normally take you, well, a couple of minutes to tell, usually, right? I told that joke for 20 minutes because I made St. Peter this kind of like overworked bureaucrat stuck in the front desk, pissed off because he started the Catholic Church and now he's basically receptionist to heaven. That's his reward. God is this kind of boss who just whimsical. He just does whatever the fuck he wants. And he ends up calling him with a fake Jamaican accent, which St. Peter is just like, isn't that just a little bit like, he wants to say, isn't it racist? But he can't because it's his boss. So he's trying to tiptoe going, should you be using that voice? And he's like, and God's putting on this fake Jamaican accent. And then it turns out, you know, he's like, have you been smoking? Because basically St. Peter's like, yeah, he only does this voice when he's been smoking the weed. And God does this whole argument about how weed is natural and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, you're the boss, whatever. And he goes, Christ, the last time we did this, we had to flood the place. Like, shit, what are we going to do this time? And then he's like, I only want the tragic deaths because people here are such a bummer and they're not funny, they're not interesting. And so this whole thing starts off. And then all those three characters later on, I gave them voices, I gave them personality, I gave them background. And Peter's like, by the end of it, pulling his hair out, having to deal with these assholes. And then the final punchline arrives and it's like oh my God. And the look on St. Peter's face, like when I acted out, was the one where people would laugh. And one of the times I told that joke, because I kept being requested to tell this joke every time, whenever we got drunk or got stoned or whatever, people would be like, oh, tell the St. Peter's joke, the St. Peter's joke, tell the St. Peter's joke. And that's when I started getting people requesting me to tell certain things. And I'm like, okay. And one of the guys mentioned, he's like, man, you can see the punchline coming from a mile away. He goes, but I don't give a shit because the best part is you telling the story. The setup is the joke. The setup, you act, because every little bit is just hilarious. Like, because I can picture God. And I just want to smack him because he's the kind of boss that you despise. And St. Peter, I'm feeling for the guy. I'm just like, Jesus, you poor schmuck. And that's what I mean. Like, because that setup, somehow the first moment I told it, I just hit on gold. And he just played it out.
I mean, I think with you and like you're just a storyteller, right? And I think it's always when you're interesting.
Raconteur. Yeah. Pretentiously, I am a raconteur.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of little forest animal you are, and are you on a tour or not? I have no idea. But okay, you are a raccoon on tour, sure. And then, but I think that like when it's a proper storyteller, you know, you kind of. You go on that journey and you're listening to the story rather than just waiting. Because if it's like a joke and you go into it as a joke, like some comedians, you immediately know, even when they're like off stage, when you're in a company of people and a comedian is about to tell you their joke, it always starts sounding immediately like a joke, right? It's kind of like, oh, we're hanging out here. So guys, a few days ago, I was in the metro and I'm like, okay, joke alert, right?
You're testing material. You're testing material. What the fuck?
Yeah, and that's how it sounds on stage as well, like quite often. And when something sounds too much like a joke, you expect it immediately to have all those, segments of a joke, like tag, punchline, or 1, 2, funny, and so on. So that's why I think that rule doesn't always apply, that you have to trim it down to like the fewer amount of words the better, laugh every 30 seconds, and all of those like unwritten and written rules of comedy. So I think like working on the material part, like editing together and throwing, like just bantering, brainstorming, throwing in some funny, I think it can work. I think especially that's good for people who are starting in comedy, because not only that I've been doing stand-up for 10 years, I've also seen thousands of people perform. Thousands at this point, right? Like just by kind of hosting and organizing open mics, I've seen at least like 400 or 500 people perform, plus like traveling around doing sets with different people and so on. Okay, hundreds for sure, maybe not thousands, but close to 1,000, maybe, I don't know. Just last year, I think in Edinburgh, I saw like 200 people perform in those 3 weeks, right? So that's why, like, not only I've been doing it for long, I've also consumed a lot of comedy, and I've seen a lot of comedians on different stages, like from an open micer who barely knows how to hold a microphone, holds it somewhere near his belly button, and is surprised why no one can hear him, to, professional comedians like whatever, like Dara O'Brien, or who did I go to see, Phil Wang, or like TV comedians, kind of big names, whatever. So that's why I kind of understand that for the beginner comic, it's very useful to go to these workshops and workshop the material, because I think some beginners don't have an idea of not what is funny. Like they all have the funny bone, they know kind of what to laugh at and so on, but they don't maybe know how to underline that funny, or how to write it in a joke. Like they have a really funny idea, something funny happened, I want to tell people. How to present it, how to then let's say deliver it to people, so people also understand why this is funny, and so on. So I think writing workshops very useful. But what I think, for example, my guys here need even more is performing workshops. And this is something that we can't do, as I said, because we don't have the space for it. Because you can meet at any cafe, you can meet in a Starbucks and write together, right? But you cannot just stand up and start like performing anywhere, basically. Like you cannot do it in a park, you cannot do it in a cafe, you cannot do it in someone's flat. You need a stage, you need a microphone, you need a mic stand, because all of those things play into a live performance. And we've had people who, like a really funny comedian who doesn't know what to do with, like, he gets up, stands on the stage, takes the mic off the mic stand, and leaves the mic stand just in front of him. And the mic stand is covering like half of his face. And he just doesn't move it to an extent that once we had another comedian who just kind of walked a minute into his set, he just walked on stage and took the mic set and removed it. Like, dude, people want to see you, you know, don't hide behind this. So these kind of things. I have comedians who don't know how to turn the mic on and off. It sounds ridiculous, but you know, like they start the set and only like 20 seconds in, someone says, the mic is off, and they just then turn it on. You know, it's the little things, but you got to learn those things. You have to learn to take the mic off the mic stand, or use the mic stand if you need your hands or whatever, but then at least move the mic lower so people can see your face and all of that. Where to hold the microphone. People hold the microphone, or as they move, the microphone goes around, doesn't pick up the voice. They hold it near their kind of chest, near their belly button, everywhere. They tangle the wires so they get like tripped by the cable. Like, I've seen it all. And these are the things that you learn by doing, but you can also learn if someone just tells you, when you get on stage, take the mic stand and just move it to the side. Right?
Even the basic
stuff. It's as simple as that.
And holding where to hold the microphone, you know, because like I know you're very much you're a chin person. You like to hold it near your chin, so that like that's how you optimize like your thing. I'm more of a free floater in front of my face sort of thing. Like I move, and but the thing is, one of the guys, and some things you don't even realize, like this guy Andrew, when he was watching me perform, apparently afterwards he goes, I noticed you switch hands. Like a lot of comedians will only hold the microphone with one hand, and they'd use the other hand for gesticulation. So you either hold it with your right and you gesticulate everything with your left. He goes, you tend to switch it up though. Like every so often you'll switch hands, and next minute you'll hold it with your left hand, and then you'll start doing action with your right. Then you'll start talking, you'll wander around, and then you switch hands. And I'm not consciously aware that I was doing that, but he said it was good because it adds dynamism. It stops the thing becoming too static, sort of thing. And he goes, and you know. And in a way, I don't know, maybe by being left hand or right hand, maybe you gesticulate in a slightly different way. Maybe one, you tend to be a little bit more fine motor skills showing, like you move your fingers more. The other one is more like brutal sort of style. So you can kind of play with that a little bit. And I think that's an interesting thing, like you said, like the physicality of it. And also being aware of the stage. One thing I remember, like, I think we discussed it once, like, before I perform, I like to kind of get up on the stage and just walk around the stage itself, because I get to know where the limits are, where the edges are, because, you know, you guys used to make fun of the fact that you were pretty much taking bets on whether I'd fall off the stage, especially if it was a small one. You, Arun, Oleg, would everyone be like, so, $10 he falls off 2 minutes into his set, like, you know, that he somehow jumps off the edge by accident, you know, slips or whatever. But the thing was, I never did, because I basically paced the stage beforehand. I always kind of had a good idea of where approximately I was on the stage. So when I know, like, this is my limit. This is, if I lunge, don't over lunge. Like, you know, like that sort of thing. That's
why. So at the main venue we perform at now here in Zagreb, we don't have an actual stage. We have like stage area, kind of a little carpet that forms the stage area, but there is no, you know, like a platform, an actual stage. And so why it's also important, again, to workshop, or at least if we don't have a workshop like we now rarely have, then come a bit earlier, check the venue, check all those things as a comic. Because what has happened also recently, we had new stage lights installed. So they create like we used to have lights that kind of shine the whole stage area, the whole front of the bar, let's say. But now it's a spotlight. So it creates like a meter and a half diameter of bright light, like a spotlight.
Right. And the spotlight does not move.
Means, no, it does not move, obviously. Right. So it means that you have to stay in that spotlight. Yeah. What we had, I think, on the last mic or a mic before that was that a comedian comes and stands in the fucking corner of the stage in the dark.
Yeah, because they don't realize that blinding light, like when you get that uncomfortable light, that's actually the good place. if the light is
Yeah, that's the good
uncomfortable
place.
for you, that's actually good because that means the audience can see you. And I know because a lot of times instinctively you're like, oh, I can't see shit, or like, oh, this is really irritating, and it's making me lose focus. I need to step away from it. And then when you do, you're like, yeah, but now you're in the freaking shadows, dude.
Yeah, and it's not even that blinding. Like in some places I performed, it's really like, you kind of lose 20% of your eyesight just during that hour of the show. But these are not even that blinding, and they're kind of high enough not to go directly in your pupil and so on. But the thing is, like, a dude literally came on stage area, whatever, and stood like just besides the spotlight and spent like 7 minutes of his set in almost complete darkness, because when you have a spotlight, that means that place is really bright, but everything around gets kind of visually even darker because it's kind of in the shade.
But was he doing maybe a bit on creepy stalkers or people waiting in bushes or some shit like that? Because that would be perfect then. You know what I mean?
No, sadly no. And also the problem is, like, a lot of the material he was doing, he was expressing also his like shock and surprise and stuff with the face, and I'm like, no one can see you. You're standing in the dark. Like, and I don't know how people don't realize those things. And again, I know, like, after you perform 10, 20, 50, 100 times, you'll learn those things naturally. It would just make sense to you. But also, I think a very easy way to learn it is to have a workshop, and you stand there and someone tells you, no, move the fuck back. And then if they tell you 3 times in 5 minutes, you'll kind of make a mental note for yourself. I should probably stand in the light, not in the dark. I should probably move the mic stand. I should probably turn on the microphone if it's not turned on when I get on stage. Like these kind of things. And I think like a workshop, kind of stage presence, performance, all this kind of stuff. Hosting workshop, I think very important if you want to have like new hosts, because again, those things don't come naturally to everyone. I even created like a hosting script. It's not there to, micromanage people, to force them to follow the script. It's to give them ideas of, how you can do it. If you don't want to do it in your own style, you can. That's fine. It's just that, a show cannot start by you just coming on stage and going like, hey, so I think we're ready to start. Should we start? It's okay. Should we start? Okay. So yesterday I was in a shop. And, like,
unless
no
that's
kind
part of
of
your shtick, unless you have it planned out that way to be the nervous thing, and then eventually, bang, you do something with it. But if not, no. Usually that is not the case.
But even if that's your, let's say it's your solo hour Edinburgh Fringe, and that's how you want to start your show, by kind of just stumbling on the stage and being like, it's okay, guys, can we start? Sure. That can be your character. But if you're hosting like an open mic or a feature show where, it needs the oomph, it needs to, and now let's welcome on stage, da, 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 like it needs the emceeing, then, so I'm saying like all those things. That's why I'm kind of sad we don't do workshops. Hopefully soon we do start them, because after summer I'm planning some changes in the schedule and more time for that as well, because I see really big potential in some people, and then there are some small things like that are really an obstacle, just like doesn't know how to hold the microphone. Like, it would be so funny if we could just hear you, dude. Like, kind of like that.
No, absolutely. I agree. And I think, and then the different kinds of workshops, because there's different skills, and hosting is different to doing stand-up directly sort of thing. And I think also it helps to appreciate and how to, it's a good place to practice your banter and stuff like that. But I would say that's a good one. And good luck with setting up your workshops. And actually, if you can send me that script, that would be great, to have that outline. Because it's something that, I actually want the other comedians to every so often host, because I'd like to get up and practice doing like a 10-minute set or a 5-minute set or a 7-minute set, because I'm losing it. You know what I mean? Like I'm losing that tightness, I've noticed. And like we said before, I like the long setups and stuff, but only when it's not rambling. I want to be able to give myself some tight times, because I find that does help cut the flat. But then that means you streamline that setup, but not to make it shorter, but to just make it more entertaining and comedic. Like, yes, it maybe it's still 10 minutes long, but it's okay. It's a good 10 minutes, not 20 minutes of waffling, but 10 minutes of nice build up. Then you're like, great. With little quips and little things here and there, little act outs. Perfect. That's what I'm going to work on. But when you're kind of the host sometimes, and you're not sure the timing sometimes, and you only have a certain amount of comedians, and then you tend to like stretch things out more than they really should be. And I need that time.
No, but like obviously it's a different skill, and I think it's a separate topic as well. You know, kind of emceeing versus like club set versus headline, all of that. Like, what is your role in the show? Let's say. But just in short, I think definitely, because when you're hosting, you really need to get people warmed up. So you might even do like an extra joke if like the one that you wanted to like finish off didn't really work well, but you have one in the barrel that you know will get them going, and you can invite the comedian now. You'll still do that one. You know, you're more flexible in crowd work, all of that. But when you're doing a set, you're doing like, you have 10 minutes, whatever you want to do in those. When I did my 10 minutes in Barcelona last year, I think I had 12 actually, and I had like 7 jokes or something, and I wrote them on my hand just in case. I don't really look at it, but it's just like a tool for me to remember them and so on. I think I got through 3 out of 7, because when I started, I did my first setup, not even a punchline, and someone from the audience said something, and we started bantering, and I did like 7 minutes of crowd work out of my 12 minutes of set. And I mean, the guys don't care. You got your 12 minutes. There are other people to go on that night. When I was at 10, the guy flashed me like, you have 2 more minutes. Get the fuck off the stage. And I can't say, oh, but I've only done 3 of my jokes. No, you know, you screwed up. You took, I mean, I didn't screw up. I love crowd work, and I'm glad that it made funny on the spot and all of that. Screw it. Great. But I'm saying like having like tight 10 is way different than hosting. And then when you just host too much, like I did in the beginning when I started producing shows here, you lose the tightness of your sets, like to do 5, 10, 20. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of trying to cultivate some new hosts. And I think we need more workshops for that, like specifically like hosting workshop, then like stage presence workshop, writing workshop, all of that. Because again, people, like for someone, it might not be relevant. Someone will stick to their style or their preference or their choice anyways. But I think it just gives you a better context. You can use it or not use it, but you see better, like, you know, what are the guidelines, let's say, for comedy.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good place to finish it off right now. You know, I think we've gone through workshops, discussed like, you know, different elements, why they're helpful, why they're handy, and they are definitely a useful thing, and something that I think all comedians, regardless of level, should occasionally do in order just to, you know, to hear different ideas, to practice, to sharpen, to hone, to come up with alternative options, and, you know, just to hang. I think it's also the other thing about workshops that we didn't cover, but I think it's the final bit I'd like to end on. It's about the camaraderie. It really helps like cement a scene, because if the comedians only see each other during the shows and they don't really hang out, like they're kind of people who are busy, who just show up, they do their bits, they run off. But you know, I think the workshop is where you kind of build that camaraderie, and you get to feel different, you know, what style of comedian everyone is and what they want to do and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of an important way, especially in the beginning for a new scene. It's a good way that comedians can get to know each other.
Yeah, I agree. And also, the more you kind of know a person and trust a person, feel comfortable with the person, the more likely you are to actually take their advice or feedback. Because, as we mentioned in the very beginning, if a stranger walks up to you, like an audience member or whatever, and says, oh, that airplane joke was really good, but you should say breakfast, not dinner. And they're like, sure, dude, whatever. Like, you know, who are you? But like, if you tell me, a guy I know for like 7-8 years, and we work together and we're friends and we do this podcast together, and you say like, dude, just a piece of advice, don't say breakfast, say dinner. And I'll be like, oh yeah, dinner works.
Yeah. Or you might go, why is dinner? You might actually kind of go, okay, why would dinner be better? Oh, I could see maybe this or that, you know. And then you're like, okay, I can play with it. But if you do dinner, that means I have to change this bit. But okay, that would work, you know, maybe blah, blah. And it's like, oh yeah, I see what you mean. And then, yeah, like you said, it's then up to you whether you use it or not. But it's just an idea that, I could have done it this way. Cool.
Yep. Yeah. So I agree that it creates that camaraderie, it creates a sense of community, and it's easier to workshop, and it's easier to be flexible and to take advice when you actually know people, trust those people, like those people even, and all of that. So thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, you just want to reach out or you want to like us or share us to any other people who might find this interesting and useful, feel free to check out all of our social media. The Comedy Kiosk is on various outdated social media like Facebook and Twitter, that is now just for videos apparently as well. But you can also find us on Instagram. And whatever platform you're listening this on, please upvote us, like us, review us, so we can get more wonderful listeners like yourself. Thank you so much. I've been Igor Monday.
And I've been David Munoz. Thank you. Good night.
Till next time.